Hey, welcome to the Road and Morale podcast. So do you ever feel like screaming out in the office, on Zoom or outside the school gates? For the love of God, come on, really? And if this is you and you're looking for an honest, fun and frank podcast on life and business, then sit back and listen to me, Road and Morale. I'll be bringing great people on the show to talk, share and debate their life experiences and business challenges, keeping the show unpolished, but in a fun and unique British style, with sarcasm, tenacity, or maybe a few swear words or tears. This podcast keeps it real, honest, raw, and removes the bullshit in the only way I know how, through authenticity and getting shit done. Think of it less like the Housewives of New York or Towie with the lipo and drama, and more like the house and lives of the real world. I hope you'll take something away to be better informed, laugh, smile, or maybe even finally getting the confidence to shout, come on really. So enjoy. Hey Cliff, how are you? Welcome to the Road and Morale podcast.
Thank you so much for the invite.
You're very welcome. It's good to see your face again. I know we've been having quite a bit of banter on Facebook recently. Listen, for all the listeners out there, I am delighted to have Cliff on the Road and Morale podcast today. And Cliff joined Lewis Silkin back in 2006 as a partner after spending over a decade, I don't want to tell him your age, but over a decade working in music and broadcasting. I know that you spearhead the media and entertainment division of Lewis Silkin and have done for quite some time. And I know that you focus on content-based entertainment. So you span so many sectors, but some of them to include FMCG, lifestyle, agencies, digital, etc. I also know that the media and entertainment division is ranked in the Legal 500. And as such, as someone who spearheads both of those directories, you're also ranked as a leading individual in that industry. Don't eye roll, you are. And if that's not enough, you're also the founder and director of 11, which is a business consultancy around disruptive business models. And that's something we're going to talk about a bit today. But again, you focus on digital media, film and sports, which is how we first met, was through an iSport Connect actually event. And when you were up on stage, I kind of thought, yeah, here's a man that I think I can connect with. He's got a great vibe, and really thought-provoking. I think that was the thing that kind of drew me to you. That was probably maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So what we're going to talk about today is something that I think I know a bit about, but actually probably scares me. And it's this whole element around Bitcoin, blockchain, and AI, and how you're bringing that to the world and your visions for the future of that. So I'm going to fire straight over to you and I'll just dive in with some questions as we go.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And actually, Ronnie, thank you very much for that kind introduction. Thank you for the kind invitation. I also, all of that is all, of course, correct. But I very much, the way that I think of it is I very much pivoted from a content lawyer to a context lawyer. And you might think, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And actually, you can say that content companies are sort of classic movie studios or platforms. But if you see how they've all pivoted in a kind of a Netflix and Disney Plus and Hulu world, they've realized that actually we've become a context world. We've become a world of networked platforms. And you mentioned chatting on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, etc. Those are context businesses, right? Traditionally, they haven't been content owners, yet they are the primary drivers of that particular world. And it's a whole new iteration of what we understood to be the internet 20 years ago. And now it's a whole new world. So having said all of that, drawing those all together, that brings me on to my sort of passion for the last decade or so in relation to areas of blockchain and artificial intelligence. And they are, I've got some people who think they're just buzzwords or things that are thrown around.
Yeah.
But actually, when you break them down and demystify them a little bit, you can actually find out, okay, I see what that means. So
please help me and the listeners demystify this world then, because that's I'd love to know more.
Yeah, I think fake news, number one, is that this is a new technology. So we'll start with blockchain. And the words blockchain and Bitcoin are used interchangeably, and hopefully after this chat, you'll no longer use them in that particular way. So, yeah, but people have been talking about blockchain as a new technology. It's over a decade old, so that's not particularly new.
No.
And in the ashes of the first financial crisis in 2008, in 2009, a white paper appeared online from a person or persons called Satoshi Nakamoto. And Satoshi's paper talked about a world of eliminating the digital double spend.
Right.
Now, you might ask, what does that mean? Well, it's solving one of the biggest issues that we'd had in digital, which was how do you create something unique in an online environment? So if I send you a photo from my phone, a wholly appropriate photo, of course.
Please, keep it clean.
You wouldn't actually be receiving the photo. You'd be receiving a copy of the photo. There'd be one on my phone and one on your phone.
Yeah.
So really, I've sent you a copy. I haven't sent you the thing itself. And along the line as well, there'll be cached copies and backups and things in the cloud, etc., etc. So one of the biggest issues that it had was how do you create scarcity? And that could be in the world of online. You know, if you were a photo library, how could you have a world where someone didn't right click and just take your stuff? Which of course is what the music industry went through in the Napster world.
Yeah.
And of course, the biggest barrier to being a digital currency would be the elimination of the double spend. If I had digital money, how could I make sure I wasn't just copying what was in my account and going to yours?
That would be wonderful though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and that's essentially all a bank does. So I've banked with First Direct now for 24 years, and digital money that I've never touched, I would call someone in the old days, and now I do it on an app that confirms if I send you £1 from my bank account and it goes to yours, that it leaves mine and goes to yours. So that's at the essence of blockchain technologies.
Right.
Was the whole, could we resolve the digital double spend? And Satoshi's white paper outlined a protocol, which was essentially that what would happen is that using a distributed ledger and protected by algorithms and in a way that would essentially be fraud proof, mean you could essentially create digital money.
Right.
And then a few months later, Bitcoin arrived based on that paperwork. And Satoshi is still believed to be the biggest holder of Bitcoin.
Do you think he was the one who created Bitcoin secretly, or right? Okay.
Yeah. So Bitcoin and blockchain are used interchangeably because Bitcoin was the first, but absolutely not the only iteration of blockchain technologies.
Right.
So it sits on that, and essentially, in order to hack a Bitcoin transaction, it would require a computing power 20 times of Google globally to hit one transaction at the same time. Wow. So the blockchain, using the distributed way that the nodes reconcile, and essentially you have got this massive record where everyone is holding tiny little bits of keys, and they can only be matched together in a way that sort of, again, you might have heard of crypto security and things like that. Cryptographic securities using underlying algorithms means that essentially a transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain probably takes about 8 minutes to reconcile and go through.
Right.
Compare that to a bank. Which,
yeah.
It could take you 3 days, remember, or 5 days for a check to clear. You can now do it in 9 minutes. And of course, at the essence of that, it essentially takes away the need for a bank.
Right.
This also explains one of the other questions that I'm often thrown, which is, why do banks not like Bitcoin?
It's going to kind of put you out of a job. Let's think about that.
And of course, and arguments thrown around, which is, it can get stolen.
Yeah.
Or it's used for bad things like drug running or hitmen or prostitution. And of course, that is exactly the same of cash.
As is now. Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think we'll ever be in a tech world where we eliminate prostitution or drug running and all of those things. They're always going to find a way.
Oh no, and cash is even better for those. I mean,
like you
said, if you want to hire if you want to hire a gunman, it's probably best you don't use somewhere where there is an immutable, worldwide held record of that transaction. So, but essentially that was the start of it.
Right.
And what has been built on top of that is really interesting. So, you know, it's almost like if we were still banging on about the World Wide Web, and it's one of the reasons why I sort of want to hand wave. Everyone is obsessed with how does it work? How does it work? You know, no one bangs on about how does the internet work, right? The more important question is what can it be used for?
Yeah.
So in that world, we do need to focus upon what it can be used for. So digital money is one estimate of it, but actually it's anywhere that there's a double spend. So I have clients of mine who are using it for doing everything from tracking fine wines. You buy a crate of wine somewhere and you want to make sure using blockchain technologies that people can't fiddle with the resources, that the same one that has gone through. It's all about digital records. And you realize that so much of what goes on online is about trust. And that, I think, is the best short-term description of what blockchain does, which is it's a trust machine.
Right.
It allows two people with no particular reason to trust each other to know that is that person, because that has been verified cryptographically. That money is going to go there. That person is who they say they are. So and you realize that so many intermediary businesses are simply based upon checking you are whom you are. That's what Airbnb does. That's what Uber does. That's what all of these, I would say, intermediate companies stand potentially to be disintermediated if your digital ID and your location and your method of payment have all been verified in virtually real time cryptographically. It allows whole new business models to bloom. And that's why a lot of people have been banging on about blockchain.
So to try and make that real for, I guess, for me, the reality then is that we could live in a world where, you know, there aren't banks and Airbnbs, we don't need a passport, we don't need credit cards, all of these things. But why, you know, how does someone like me get involved in it? How do I start embracing it and understanding that world?
Well, I think for me, you know, yeah, so I mean, some people have been speculating using, you know, but there are people, you know, who speculate how quickly a cockroach is going to go across a floor. But, you know, so the whole Bitcoin world, et cetera, et cetera. You know, one of the first ever Bitcoin transactions was from a developer who paid for a pizza using 10,000 Bitcoin.
Right.
Okay. That pizza is worth about 80 million pounds because of the inherent value of what people have done. And there are lots of people who think that in a world of quantitative easing, we're in a world where Federal Reserve can just chuck out a few trillion, etc. Whereas actually blockchain is it's utterly scarce. There will only ever be so many Bitcoin. It can be sliced up in many different ways and can't be fiddled in that way. And also in the world where in the past, there was a flight to gold because we think it's a scarce resource. There was one guy at a Bitcoin hackathon who told me, yeah, and if they found out that one of the pyramids under a few layers of brick was made of pure gold, it would send the entire financial system
into meltdown.
Because we think it's scarce, whereas actually Bitcoin is scarce and it's controlled and there's a ledger that does that. So you've got this whole idea of digital scarcity, you've got an idea of digital provenance. And really, in the last 25, 30 years, we've let go of scarcity, we've let go of provenance, we've let go of privacy. And, you know, if you can secure your privacy cryptographically, and then also the next layer of it. So if you imagine the sort of blockchains, because there's not just one, there's a Bitcoin protocol, but there's hundreds of, if not thousands of blockchains out there now that have been built. People have been building very interesting things on top of them. And there is a world, we have heard of things called smart contracts, where essentially what you can do is that you can program transactions on the blockchain that say, right, send this to Rona, but she can only open it on her birthday and only spend it in these particular 3 shops. You know, so you can start programming into a transaction
the rules
various
around it.
conditions, and that's why they're called smart contracts. They're not smart and they're not contracts, but apart from that, it's a perfect mix. I'm not dodging your question. I'm going to come to an answer on that one, which is actually blockchain only gets interesting when it gets really, really boring.
Okay.
And the way that how it can and ultimately will be worked. So there's a lot of people that thought that in and of itself it would just change the world and free everything. But we kind of thought that about Twitter, and we kind of thought that about Facebook. And, in the first .com boom, people thought if you got the right URL, you could get chocolateteapot.com and then you could do an IPO, etc. We continually stumble as we move forward. Blockchain gets really, really interesting when digital identities are secure, when globally people who have never had any kind of record or vote, I don't know, if only there are any recent examples where you'd want to make sure a paper-based system wasn't being interfered with.
So for the listeners right now, when this goes out, which isn't immediately, we're on day 3 of the presidential election. Let me just put that out there.
Exactly. And also, but if you think about how much of your life is based upon paper-based records, the house that you're in is registered somewhere on a land registry. That process of conveyancing is mostly 12 weeks of heartache of checking. And checking records are up to date, and checking there isn't a charge on the property, and checking that the record is correct, and making sure that it hasn't been interfered with. And everyone has to be able to rely on that. Whilst it's been digitized, it's not been cryptographically secure.
Yeah.
So if at the age of birth you can have people's ID, their residence, their things, and you can build trust into the system. And I mentioned the date very, very specifically about 2008, 2009, because of course that's when the world started to fall in and be really, really concerned about not only centralized systems, but there was a fundamental breakdown of trust. So what for me represents the biggest opportunity for blockchain is the opportunity to essentially create and put trust back in the system, because that's all that PayPal does.
And I think that's probably something that, like me and others, we don't trust what's out there now. So this whole new scary secret, world that we don't understand, or, when we think about me becoming a digital Bitcoin or blockchain, sorry, it's kind of like that information is there then for the world, and who could do what with that information. And it's really hard to trust in it. Who's running it? I suppose it's easy to say, well, we've got the head of Lloyd's and the federal bank, but they're crap at doing what they do. So
allegedly. But yeah, no. But people don't trust it. So if you were able to basically inject a level of cryptographic trust, and yes, there are going to be con men out there. Yes, they're going to do that. People will say, oh, well, I've heard there's been some digital wallets that have been hacked. So, yeah, and if you leave your PIN number on your desk, someone will hack it. That's just the way. Well, I can't. It's technology, not magic.
Of course.
But if we can use blockchain technologies and blockchain-based systems in order to be able to create trust, provenance, identity, security, and also what we want to do is at the heart of it is understanding that centralized points of power, and that can be government, those can be businesses, that can be media, used to be seen as huge elements of strength. Now they're seen as they're not. Now some of it has been everything from the MPs, scandal, which from a UK perspective, people now, historians, are saying started something in terms of breaking the fundamental trust of what went on between ourselves and the kind of moral compact that we had with government, etc., etc. And this stuff might all sound a bit sort of esoteric and highfalutin, but they are all absolutely linked, and they're playing themselves out in politics, not only in the US but certainly in the UK. And also that we are being riven. So, and also people feel that they can't trust their eyes, or they can't trust the news, or they can't trust vaccines, or they can't trust. So it all comes back to trust. And I think there is a world where blockchain technologies, distributed ledger technologies, cryptographically secure technologies, and a decentralized opportunity create a way of being able to inject trust again.
So let's go far out, and let's go, what if we completely flipped to this world and there was complete trust? What are we saying would be the impacts on the likes of, passport offices and Airbnbs and banks, what would happen?
Well, the thing is they don't necessarily have to change they don't have to go out of business. The question is, will they embrace it or not? So, the smarter ones are already using that kind of technology in order to be able to inject trust. Facebook last year, they're desperate to do what happens in China. So in China, there's a huge platform called WeChat.
Yeah, I use that. I used to work in China last year, so we use that quite a lot.
So, and it's interesting how many people in Western countries aren't aware of it. But essentially, it's like a Facebook feed, come Amazon, come entire life in your feed. And if you want to think about what Facebook Messenger is turning into, why they bought WhatsApp and why they're trying to do that. Now, Facebook have said quite openly they want to be as easy to send money as it is to send a picture.
Right.
And they have built something called their Libra project, which is trying to adopt distributed ledger technologies. There is a fascinating letter from the US Senate where basically says what you're doing could tip over our banking system. You must stop this right now. So we're going through this world, and the music industry did it with Napster, and the the taxi industry is doing it with Uber, and retailers are doing it with Amazon. It's that kind of painful, peripubescent world where people are wrestling with the inevitable.
Yeah.
The real question is if they can start using those systems in order to inject trust, they'd probably supercharge it. And banks are the biggest, some say they're the biggest beneficiaries of fraud. They're the first people that fraud is perpetrated on. They waste billions on illegal transactions. So again, a friend of mine puts it beautifully, which is most businesses used to make money under the table. What they're now finding with blockchain is there's more money on the table than under it. They just haven't realized it yet.
No. And actually, just in that very statement around, if you just took the global value alone of fraudulent, wasted billions, what could we do with those billions in a positive environment, be it climate change, be it poverty, whatever? Why wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah. And, if you were able to send digital currency to people in a crisis, a hurricane, a tornado, or an earthquake, or you could make sure that the money that you donated in order to build housing, that the infrastructure had actually gone from a steel yard in Finland and actually arrived and be able to verify. Because right now, I can tell you, you don't.
You don't.
Just don't know.
Because it feels like everyone's kind of taken a chunk as it goes down that supply chain and corruption, and then.
Sure. So the real question is how do you reward all of those people instead of making them feel that they have to take, and what we have found is that when you find the value proposition, people will pay you. They just may not pay you for the same thing.
Yeah.
So, in a media example as well, Disney used to monetize scarcity. You remember even their VHS videos, and it's going to age me somewhat. They would only make available for a short time, and they'd charge 20 quid when everybody else was charging $12.99. And now they've had to pivot to a Disney Plus world.
Yeah.
And say, right, we will give you constant direct access to Disney, and all of those people that were in the middle, like HMVs and Tower Records and blah blah blah, we cut all of them out.
Yeah.
And now, if they hadn't pivoted to that company could be in significant problem in the pandemic.
Definitely.
Right. So by adopting and pivoting and understanding the value of the Disney brand now is about giving constant, refreshed, exclusive content direct. A year 180 pivot in their content strategy to more content strategy. And of course, the technologies that will enable that are going to be ones that can take money direct and not going to have chargebacks and fraud, etc., etc. And then comes on to the other element, which I wanted to chat about, which is about algorithms and AI.
Yeah.
The ability to be able to, instead of spending trillions on creating a whole bunch of content and hoping you might like some of it, which is the equivalent of, flinging what at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
Actually, you've got a company like Netflix that uses algorithms to know to the beat to what you will like, Rona, and what your family would like, and what your daughters would like, and also,
Yeah.
more importantly, what you don't know what you're going to like yet. And that's at the heart of Amazon. They understand before you know you want to buy it, what you want to buy,
Yeah.
because they're using algorithms and they're using machine learning in order to be able to understand and optimize. So I think that the artificial intelligence world, we immediately go to sci-fi, we immediately go to the Terminator, or we go to Element as well. But we're all carrying a form of artificial intelligence in our pockets. Every
Yeah.
single phone. I won't say the names because various devices will fling off around me, as it were. But everyone thinks, about singularity or consciousness or those sorts of things. And those sorts of things they're not quite science fiction, but they're a bit out there. But using machine learning, which is a mass way of being able to understand the world. And I don't know, if you're a driver, you probably use something like Waze. That used forms of artificial intelligence using algorithms in order to optimize many of the deliveries for your home deliveries, whatever parcel company you use or furniture, use artificial intelligence in order to be able to optimize and make things very, very efficient. And we're also being able to personalize content and elements. Now, this has been, of course, somewhat to date because it's been a bit kids with guns.
Right.
And now you can see the social platforms realizing that people have been using artificial intelligence and algorithms to invert their truth. So
Yeah.
quite famously, if they've been fascinating studies that, what does your Facebook feed or your Instagram feed look like if you'll leave or if you'll remain? And in America, it's been somewhat more weaponized with regard to, people who vote Republican right now. There's a good majority of them who think that Biden is worse than, Fidel Castro or,
Yeah.
and they genuinely live in fear. And
And I
that's
think
been
that's that.
amplified and echoed using that stuff.
Yeah, and I think recently when I delved more into that one, I guess the social dilemma showed that you just realise that you think your views are your views, and you're surrounded by everyone who thinks the same as you, and that deep down there are a million sides to a story, but it pushes you, and even through the presidential election now, the way the president can tweet something and it makes people react to the extent of violence and just for a freedom of a vote. It's really scary.
Yeah, and that's been weaponized. Now, again, this just goes to show people saying, oh, this means algorithms bad. No, this means algorithms powerful.
Yes.
And even with what's happened with the social platforms, I think Twitter's had an incredible election. Actually, have you seen how the reporting? So Trump would tweet, the sky is green, and everywhere Trump says sky is green. Right now, all of the headlines are Trump baselessly claims, falsely claims. That hasn't happened for 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
So, and you're also seeing a world where these realizing that just simply having an open platform without necessarily a form of, because there is no objective truth. There's objective views. Sorry, there's subjective views, and there is, but you can't have subjective truth.
Yeah.
Today is Friday, and you can scream fake news all you like, as it were, but it really is.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to, and again, it's because as these things understand and settle down, and that's where I think things like blockchain and decentralized ledgers can help inject some trust.
Yes.
So we could artificial intelligence, a wonderful element, artificial intelligence is driverless cars. Now, driverless cars technology, so Tesla have just released their full self-driving beta and it works. And
Right.
they have a technology in order to be able to simply the car driving itself. Now, they're clearly sort of vanguards in this, but in the next 10 years, probably going to see more and more of that.
Yeah.
You'd better hope that there is a decentralized, cryptographically protected way so that people couldn't hack that. So
Yeah.
again, so it comes into pretty much how I see almost, if you can envisage strands of DNA,
Yeah.
how blockchain technologies and artificial intelligence can interact, and also with the number of number of transactions that blockchain technology would be recording, only artificial intelligence, only robotic process automation, only machine learning only algorithms are going to be able to keep up with it.
Yeah, because our mind can't.
Correct. And the thing that links them all is algorithms. So people often say, "Oh, there aren't going to be any jobs." Oh, there's going to be loads of jobs, Rona, but they're not going to be based upon
What we've
manufacturing.
always known. Yeah.
Correct. Correct. And in the same way, and again, there's a one of my things, just because of the background I've got, is I'm sort of a subject matter expert in artificial intelligence and music, and I do a lot of teaching, and then all of them, they have the same visceral reaction, even though they're young.
Yeah.
They love the idea of driverless cars. They love the fact that everything's personalized. They love that everything's on demand. But they say, "Oh, but the machine can't compose music. That's outrageous." And it can, by the way.
It can. Yeah.
And it's like, look, I feel, look, it's a tool. Now, you can do bad things with a hammer. You can
Yeah.
do really, really good things with a hammer. So the question is, how are we going to use this tool? And I feel no more need to apologize to a musician for working with artificial intelligence as I do feel the need to apologize to a horse before I get into a Tesla, right? It's
Right.
just not what it's going to be. And the
And
real question is how is it going to be, and how do you want to get there?
yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's like, what if this feels, ultimately it's inevitable. This is going to continue to develop and grow and become part of our lives. So I look at it as an individual and go, how do brands and contents and leaders and banks, how do they help me understand it and drive that trust into adapting with it? And how do I make sure that I'm continually educated so I'm aware for my children and my children's children? It's really quite, the only thing that I guess scares me more than anything, it's not the trust, it's not the technology, it's not the job losses, because I genuinely do believe there's a whole new world of opportunities out there. It's the human element of life. And I think, if anything we've learned this year, is very much that core need to be connected with people and emotions. That's the bit that would frighten me.
I think that's right, and that's one of the reasons why I'm a technology advocate, but I don't worship it. And actually, the heart of, I think it's great that we don't have to send kids up chimneys anymore. I think it's great that people don't have to have agrarian worlds where they have to do back-breaking work for the majority of it. In our lifetime, Rona, people were saying, people used to have to, file paperwork or learn to type or do all of this stuff. And there was this whole idea of it would just, oh, no, you just get new jobs. You've
Yeah.
got new elements of it. And actually, there's a friend of mine who said, from a science fiction perspective, you've either got Blade Runner or you've got Star Trek, right? Where you end up with this dystopian world where it's all choked and dark and robots run everything and blah blah. Or you've got Star Trek world where actually we realise that technology means that we don't have to do crap anymore and we can focus on exploration and looking into ourselves and looking outwards.
Yeah.
Now, don't want to depress you, but Blade Runner was set in 2020, so it looks a bit more Blade Runner than Star Trek right now. But if we can, and look, there is absolutely no way we would have been able to map the human genome
Right.
without technology like this.
Yeah.
Without that understanding of the genome, you wouldn't get what will be reliably informed, going to be the rapid, production of the vaccines. There's not going to be one, there's going to be two or three.
Yeah.
But they work, and they work because we understand DNA and RNA in a world that we've never been able to do that before. And if that can allow us to reconnect as human beings, and there is a sense now, not just politically, but given the pandemic and given the other elements as well, of what do we build back to? And there seems to be a feeling, and perhaps it's not going to be over optimistic, and who knows, maybe this prediction will age badly, but a bit of a breaking of a fever. And
Right.
perhaps we'll focus on what is really, really important and all those things we took for granted. And
Yeah.
actually how we were all about a very much inwardly focused, nativist, protectionary, angry world where we realized all those things that we actually had it really well.
Yeah. And actually, even though I fear the loss of human element. Actually, the opportunity is that if we embrace the technology, we trust the technology, we move with it, we hopefully free up way more time to spend with our families and spend time in nature and focus on climate and poverty and things like that. Maybe that's what this world can give us. I guess a lot of people's distrust and frustration is that they don't feel like they have a choice or they can influence power, and so therefore, whilst there's money to be made, it's always going to be in that same realms with the same people, and that distrust is always going to be there. But it's an exciting future, but still one that I think most of us, we don't realise that we're already embracing it. You know, somebody moaned on Facebook the other day that, oh, this track and trace, they're going to know where I am, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, mate, you've got a mobile phone.
If you've got a mobile phone, you use Gmail or leave your house. That ship sailed a long time ago.
Exactly.
Long time ago. Or again, you know, just, well, I won't even say the names because it will end up ruining the podcast. But, you know, with regard to, if you just say certain names, you'll realize how much artificial intelligence there is in your life. So the idea that you're going to hold this back is nonsense. The idea that it's going to be in and of itself evil, nonsense. The real question is going to be what we do with it. But if you just look at what has led to these fundamental breakdowns in trust and what has weaponized them and what has done it, it's almost like, let's take back control. Let's use these technologies to inject trust back into the system. Let's use the algorithms in order to be able to scan and stop fake news and stop nonsense about 5G, you know, sort of, you know, I mean, again, grown up, sensible people.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like every single time, we've seen it before the Dark Ages, there's a form of enlightenment. And the form of the Dark Ages is always a refutation of science. It's always a refutation of technology. It's always a refutation of experts.
Yeah.
Whenever anyone starts deriding experts, you know, you're on a dark path. And it happened in the 1930s. It happened in the, you know, in the medieval times, and it's happened right a bit right now. But then after that, you know, as night follows day, and then more importantly, day follows night, there's a period of enlightenment. So let's hope. And, you know, I spent the 80s completely afeared that I'd be dying in nuclear fire, which is no way for a child to think. But
that's pretty intense, Cliff.
No. But, you know, how much, if you look back at the, from pop to TV to etc., we were reliably informed that there was going to be a nuclear war.
Yeah.
And then you had, you know, you had the financial crisis in 1989, Big Bang, and blah, blah, etc. And then it ushered in the 90s, where you had a whole focus on the environment, a whole focus on a much wider thing, much more inclusivity. We joined a European Union of Nations, etc. You had the Good Friday. So, you know, whilst it feels like these are unprecedented times, they're not unprecedented. They're cyclical.
Yeah.
I've always
and this will happen again.
That, you know, of course it's going to happen again. Never again in business means 8 years. Fact. So we just forget. And what happens is that, you know, we look over, and because the earth is round, yes, it is round.
No, it's not. It's flat.
Exactly. The parabola of it means that you can't see behind it. That doesn't mean because it isn't there or it wasn't there.
No. Do you know what? I could honestly pick your brains and talk about this for hours. I'm excited about it. I'm intrigued about it. Do I feel like I could talk about it a bit better now? Yes. So thank you. You've made it a lot more real for me and hopefully for the listeners as well. So thank you so much. Maybe in 6 months or another year, we'll do this again and see if some of those predictions and, you know, the winners and losers in this world. And I think the key to what you say is around those that embrace it for the good. The reality is, yes, there'll be those that embrace it for the bad, but that will always be, as you say, day follows night and night follows day. So Cliff, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope the listeners have really enjoyed this session as well. And Yeah, thanks again.
Pleasure. Stay well.
I will do. Take care, Cliff. Bye. So that's it. You've made it. The show's over. Thank you for being with us. I hope you've been able to take something away, maybe solve a problem, or just know you're not alone. Here's hoping it made you smile with a few laughs along the way. Please feel free to find me on all social media channels, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search the Rona Morale podcast. Have an awesome day and see you next time.